Okay. I hope we are live. We were just about to start, but YouTube terminated our video. I don't know why. We hadn't started yet anyway. So I just sent the new link out to Jay. So he will join in shortly. By the time Jay comes, I just need to figure out practical things from this side because I have to set up everything from the beginning. But I am hoping you can hear me and see me. If anyone is already on YouTube and you can hear me and see me, can you just like send me WhatsApp message or something? I can see what's happening over there. Other than we are just waiting for Jay to come. So plan for tonight was having Jay with us and talking through what happened to the first Quran. I'm just waiting Jay to come. I hope he was able to get the link. Okay, so thanks for letting me know that you can hear us. Hear me actually. Currently it's only me. And Jay is gonna join us. And plan today is looking at the how the Quran is compiled, but we are just gonna start from the beginning for all of us to hello Jay.
Hi.
Thanks for your WhatsApp message. That means I'll turn off my WhatsApp so we don't get distracted by it. So welcome Jay, how are you?
Well, pretty good now that we finally got up and running. It looks like YouTube played a fastball on you and tried to get you censored, but they can't censor you for long, can they?
Okay, let me just start with the basics. Can you give permission to be recorded on this live stream, Jay?
Yes, you can permit. Permission is given. Is this, you do this every time, and I always give you permission.
Yeah, but as you can see, there is like interesting relationship between DCCI and YouTube.
Well, God bless you. I'm glad you're keep going. I'm glad you come around the other way, and I'm glad we're finally back on air again. So hello to everybody who is there.
So thanks for joining us all the way from States, and I think it's afternoon there, and in here it's very hot evening.
It's about 5:15 here in the afternoon. It's very hot here as well, though. I understand you're going through a heat wave there in London.
Yeah, it's awful. You can't even go out. Like I can have stroke like at any time. Anyway, so those of you who are watching us on YouTube, apparently we don't have Daniel who can keep eye on YouTube. Therefore, we are going to do a couple of things at the same time. Just basics for all of you. If you want to get our attention, please on the chat part of YouTube, put @ in front of DCCI Ministries, and hopefully I will able to see your comments. And please keep your comments on the topic and make sure you express your love, concern, and respect to one another for us to move forward healthier and for YouTube to kind of increase its love towards us. Of course, our eternity is not based on how much YouTube loves us or hates us, but to the blood of Lord Jesus Christ. So we are, as we stand under his grace, once again, we are grateful for what Lord Jesus Christ did for us. I think I am set on this side, Jay.
Yeah, it looks like you have about 28 people who are watching right now.
Okay. So, Jay, it's been a while. How are you doing, Jay?
Well, it's been about a month. I think we were together in London. We went up and got up on the ladder together a number of Sundays ago, and we introduced the 22 different corrections. Daniel Brubaker's 22 corrections.
Intentional corrections.
Intentional corrections. I stand corrected. You keep me honest. And we had a somewhat of a semi-debate with Mansour Ahmad, who made 2 amazing admissions while he was on the ladder, which we're going to do in a future video. You and I need to unpack what he said there, but not today. That's not for today. Yeah, so it's been a while. It's been good to get back, and it's good to get back and talk about this book, the Qur'an, again.
Yeah. So how have you been?
I've been okay. I'm going to be heading out to Paraguay in about 3 or 4 days, and then I'm heading off to do some teaching there. But I'm coming back to Britain again this summer.
Okay. Sorry, where are you going to go?
Paraguay.
Where is that?
It's right smack in the middle of South America.
Oh, okay. Okay. Be careful when you travel in this part of the world. Okay. So, I ask you to join us because I want us to unpack what happened with the Quran, which Muhammad claimed to receive according to Islamic tradition. So we know Quran is revealed to Muhammad from 610 to 632. When Muhammad died, according to Sunni tradition, we didn't have complete Quran. Soon after the death of Muhammad, under the Abu Bakr, first Quran put together. Historically, miracle of Islam, we don't have the first Quran today. But I want us to go through the well-known hadith and then see actually why and how Muslim put together the first Quran and what is the problem with that. As a kind of, this will be the introduction, and then as we move forward for the future episodes, we will break it down actually how, according to Islamic tradition, Quran has been butchered. Nice way putting. Are you okay with my plan?
Sounds good. Now, I think we're going to be doing, and we're going to go back to the hadith. I mean, we need to go back and look and see where the only place we can find that speaks about how this book was put together. And I think you're going to go ahead and open that up. So I'll let you do that. And then I have a lot of questions to throw out. And I hope the Muslims are here. It's actually a few people. I can see the comments here. Bart Connolly, I thank you for commenting on my shirt. It is a very bright shirt, but it's one I'm getting ready for Paraguay, which is in Central America. I'm sorry, in South America.
Good. Alongside of your shirt, of course, we are covered and clothed with the blood of Christ. That's another side information. So we look inside, we don't look outside. So let me just share the screen and then everyone can see the hadith we are going to talk about. Traditionally, this hadith known as Sahih Bukhari, volume 6, hadith number 509. And from sunnah.com, hadith references volume 6, book 60, hadith number 201. Or Arabic references, book 65, hadith 4679, which hopefully you can see on the screen. I'm gonna try to make it bigger for you to have easy access. Jay.
Yeah.
Do you wanna practice your English little bit for us and then read the whole hadith for us? Are you able to do that? Just we read it all in one go and then we break it down, if that's okay with you.
Okay, let me just bring it up here so it's a little larger. Now, narrated by Zayd ibn Thabit al-Ansari. And this is, now who is Zayd ibn Thabit? Before we even read it, he is the secretary of Muhammad. You've got to, just leave it there. That's good. Right there, you got it. He is the secretary of Muhammad. So therefore, he would be the one that should have written this down. The Quran while Muhammad was living. And this is what it says: who was one of those who used to write the divine revelation. Abu Bakr sent for me, this is Zayd ibn Thabit writing. So he sent for me, Zayd ibn Thabit, after heavy casualties among the warriors of the Battle of Yamama. and where a number of the Qur'an were killed. Qur'an would mean those who had memorized the Quran. They were the companions of the Prophet. Umar was present. Umar would be the second caliph. Abu Bakr is the first caliph. So you have both Abu Bakr and Umar there talking to Zayd ibn Thabit, who is in front of them. He was present with Abu Bakr, and he said, Umar has come to me, this is Abu Bakr speaking, and said, the people have suffered heavy casualties on the day of the Battle of Yamama. And I am afraid that there will be more casualties among the Qur'an, those who had known the Quran by heart. These are the memorizers, the Hafiz we call them today, on other battlefields, whereby a large part of the Quran may be lost unless you collect it. And I am of the opinion that you should collect the Quran. Abu Bakr added, I said to Umar, how can I do? Now this is Zayd ibn Thabit speaking now. He says to Umar, how can I do something which Allah's apostle has not done? So how can I do something that Muhammad had never done? Umar said to me, responds, by Allah, it is really a good thing. So Umar kept on pressing, kept on insisting, trying to persuade me to accept his proposal, till Allah opened my bosom for it, and I had the same opinion as Umar. Zayd ibn Thabit then adds, Umar was sitting with him, Abu Bakr, and was not speaking to me. You are a wise young man, and we do not suspect you of telling lies or of forgetfulness, and you used to write the divine inspiration for Allah's messenger. Therefore, look for the Quran and collect it in one manuscript, so in one codex. By Allah, this is now Zayd ibn Thabit responding, if he, Abu Bakr, had ordered me to shift one of the mountains from its place, it would not have been harder for me than what he had ordered me concerning the collection of the Quran. I said to both of them, this is still Zayd ibn Thabit speaking, how dare you do a thing which the Prophet has not done? Abu Bakr replied, by Allah, it is really a good thing. So I kept on arguing with him about it till Allah opened my bosom for that which he had opened the bosoms of Abu Bakr and Umar. So I started locating Quranic material and collecting it from parchments, scapula, leaf stalks of date palms, and from the memories of men. Scapula would be bones, who knew it by heart. I found from Khuzaimah 2 verses of the Surah Al-Tawbah, which is Surah 9, which I had not found with anybody else. And they were, and this is what it is, verily there has come to you an apostle, Muhammad, from amongst yourself. It grieves him that you should receive any injury or difficulty. He, Muhammad, is ardently anxious over you to be rightly guided. That's from chapter 9 or Surah 9, verse 128. The manuscript on which the Quran was collected remained with Abu Bakr till Allah took it unto him, and then with Umar till Allah took it unto him, and finally it remained with Hafsa, Umar's daughter, and she put it under her bed.
Okay, thank you very much, Jay. For those of you who kind of struggles to remember the dates, if you are like us, remember Sahih Bukhari is dated for 870s, and Abu Bakr is around 634. Like that's the time he died. So
this would be between 632 and 634. This event, yeah. Abu Bakr, I mean Al-Bukhari is writing this between 850 and 870. So yeah. You're talking a good 200 years later, 250 years later.
So approximately 200 years later, 250 years later, a man who never met with Muhammad is giving us information how first Muslims put the Quran together. Okay, it's not only he never met with Muhammad, he never met with Abu Bakr, Umar, Zayd bin Thabit. Okay, never. Because by the time he was alive and putting that together, those people were already dead, for long dead. So, Jay, the claim I hear from Muslims is like becoming very famous, that Quran has been perfectly preserved with the oral tradition as well as written tradition. Okay, so when I just read this hadith without any basic knowledge on history, Actually, this hadith tells me at the beginning of Islamic tradition, beginning of history of the Quran, actually oral tradition failed. Therefore, Muslim needed to put together the first Quran. Would you agree with me or would you disagree with me?
I would agree and disagree, both. I'm not going to help you out on this one for one very good reason. Stop and think what you're asking. What you're asking, the stipulation, boy, that's an enormous jug you're drinking water out of.
Okay, it's fine. People don't see when you speak. People don't see what I do. Okay,
That's your
therefore,
baptismal jug. You know that.
therefore, there is no need for you to express my motive. And
I,
what is good?
please don't fall in and swim in it. But let's get back to the subject at hand. So we're talking about oral tradition. The whole problem here, Hatun, is there, and Muslims really, when you really press them on textual tradition. Remember when we were on the ladder a month ago, when Mansour made that claim that there you can trace a textual tradition all the way back to the time of Uthman, and even all the way back to the time of Muhammad. Textual tradition. Textual tradition is a written tradition. Oral tradition is not a written tradition. And oral tradition is where Muslims fall back on. That's the only thing they can fall back on. If you had watched Mansour when he got off the ladder, if you look at the Speaker's Corner video of that event, watch what happens when he got off the ladder. He made a beeline for an young American boy, and he confronted him saying, we don't have to worry about these texts. We don't have to worry about these manuscripts. We have an oral tradition that goes right back to the Prophet Muhammad. Here's why I'm bringing this up at the very beginning. If there's an oral tradition, then why did Al-Bukhari have to write this? That's the first question.
Yeah, that's my question as well. Why Abu Bakr needed to compile this at the first place?
There is the problem. The answer is right there. We already read what the answer is. The answer is those who had memorized it were dying off. They were dying off at the Battle of Yamama. Many of them died off at the Battle of Yamama. And here's the other problem. Oral tradition, by its very definition, is open to embellishment. What we're saying right now, anybody could go and take what we've said in this, what we're saying today, and you could have all these people. There's 80 people who are watching us right now. Of the 80 people who are watching us, we could ask each of them to now write down what they heard us say. How many different versions would you get from what we've now gone into? We're only into it. We're not even 10 minutes into it. We're only about 10 minutes into this. How many different versions would you get of the 10 minutes we've just spoken of from those 80 people? 80 different versions. That's the problem with oral tradition. Nobody will write the same thing. That's why you have to write down what then comes from heaven. Because if this is created, if this is an uncreated book, and that's what chapter 85, verse 22 says in the Qur'an, it's uncreated. If this is an uncreated book, how can you ever leave it to people's memory? How could you ever assume that people's memory will take that which is uncreated and be able to not copy, but to solidify everything that has been uncreated, word for word, letter for letter, dot for dot, vowelization for vowelization, correct? And so obviously Al-Bukhari in 850 to 870 is writing this. You can see this has been a discussion that's gone on. This has continued for almost 200 years. There had to have been a written text. There had to have been a codex. There had to have been a manuscript. That's why he's even writing this. That's why he's putting it down. And he's giving the story of how this manuscript was written down. And the reason is because this is a safeguard. It's a safeguard to people's memory. It's a safeguard to basically, as a model, you have to have one canonized text from which everybody's memory can be tested against. Because otherwise, oral tradition will embellish it, they'll accrete it, they'll delete it, they'll say different things about it, they'll have many different memory lapses, and you'll have a huge number, thousands of different people who will have disagreements. What do? You always go back to the original. And the original has to be written down. That's why we do it today. And you don't. If I were to make an agreement with you right now, Hatun, and I would shake your hands, and I know Muslims do this, and they say, Inshallah, if God wills it, I will do what I did tomorrow. But what if I decided that I didn't want to I didn't want to fulfill the agreement that I gave yesterday. I can pretty much say anything I want. How do I know? How do I know what the agreement was of yesterday? You have to have it written down. That's why we have receipts. Am I correct? That's why we do everything by having it written down. And here al-Bukhari, knowing this, has to give the story of that written text. That's why it's so good that we have al-Bukhari, that we can go back to him and we can unpack and see what actually happened.
So in that case, you are actually agreeing with me that this account shows us there is an issue with the oral tradition, with the memorization of the Quran for people to remember. Therefore, there is a need for Quran to put together.
Absolutely, and that point I will agree. As far as your other point that whether or not al-Bukhari, whether or not this is how it happened, I will agree. I think there's many other problems, but that's for the historical critique, which you can do at another date.
And also, those of you who are listening us, please beware. This is the Sunni account. Shiites are disagreeing on how the Quran is compiled, and they believe in the time of Muhammad, Ali compiled the Quran, and then he with all of his notes. But miracle happens even though we don't have that Quran. Anyway.
Let me just say one more thing. I see Kashif M, you've written a very good comment here. You mentioned that al-Bukhari manuscript did not exist until the 12th century. If that is so, then why do Muslims say Bukhari wrote it in the 9th century if manuscripts was in the 12th century? We need to answer that. And that's very true. Kashif, thanks for bringing that up. That is another problem that we're not even going to get in today, and that is, how do we even know what al-Bukhari wrote is really what he wrote, since we have nothing from the 9th century that is from his pen. There are no originals of al-Bukhari, just like there are no origins of any Quran. There's no origins of any of this. And the earliest manuscript, the earliest codex we have for al-Bukhari begins to appear in the 12th century. It could all be fraudulent. You're correct. We're assuming an awful lot here by suggesting that al-Bukhari is authoritative. That's why I'm a little reticent to even say let's trust al-Bukhari. But since we are talking about what Muslims believe, we're going to have to start with al-Bukhari.
Okay, can I just add a couple of points what you said, Jay, on Bukhari? Even Islamic tradition would agree that we don't have original of Bukhari. Current book which is identified as Sahih Bukhari, actually not Sahih Bukhari, it's one of his students. And miracles happen in Islamic history that so according to Islamic tradition, Bukhari puts together the hadiths, and then he throws 98% away, and then he's got 4 students. Somehow they put together again, and then something happens, miracle happens. They all kind of get lost, and current Bukhari we have is actually not much to do with Bukhari. And our kind of closest manuscripts we have on Sahih Bukhari is 1330 HA, because that is the time where it has been published published in Egypt, I think, from Yunine. My pronunciation might be wrong, but like those of you who kind of know a little bit history. So Yunune's original was sent to Egypt from Istanbul to be published. That is the date. When you translate that 1330 HD is 1895 AD. So that's like nearly 200 years ago, over 200 years ago.
Okay, and let's just back up a little bit, because just so people understand, unpack a little bit of what you said. You said an awful lot there, and it's great. It's important that we need to emphasize what you've just said. Did you hear her say that al-Bukhari had an enormous amount of material from which to choose from? He was given about 600,000 what we call akhbars. Akhbars are sayings. These are what they call matan, M-A-T-N in Arabic. And this matan, he was given that to basically decide what of it was authentic and what of it was not authentic. Of the 600,000 that he was given, he whittled it down. Remember what Hatun said, 98% of it he threw out. He only retained 2% of what he was given. Why did he throw 98% out? What was it he didn't like about that 98%? And the 2% that he gave, that he retained, came to around 7,387 or 90 akhbars. Of those 7,000, roughly 400, there's so much repetition in them that when you look at unique akhbars, it only comes to around 2,300 of that were unique. Now that is now been put into 9 volumes. We can get those 9 volumes today that you can buy on the internet. In fact, you have them behind you. If you have them up there in your room, Hatun,
yeah, I do have them.
Just point to them. Just point where they are.
They're just behind me in the bookshelf.
If you can see those ones that are stacked up, that's the 9 volumes of Al-Bukhari that you can buy, and that only is 2% of everything that he was given. What did he do with the 98% that he threw out? Here's a question I'd like to know. And why did he find it fraudulent? What was this criteria? He doesn't tell us. But getting back to what Kashkishat said, even the 9 volumes that we have, those 9 volumes were not ever published until the 1800s, as Hatun said 200 years ago.
But they are not from Bukhari. They are from the students of Bukhari, and then someone called Farbari, and his date is 932. But the current Bukhari we have is actually from Yunini, and his date is like 1300s. But overall, even though the manuscripts we have from 1800s is not fully complete form, like manuscripts we have early than that, they are not even in full form. It's like history of Bukhari is pretty complicated, but all you need to know is we don't have the originals, as well as like the Quran, as well as but we have to follow or we have to read what Muslims kind of today see as the authentic hadiths, and according to their authentic hadiths, Abu Bakr was concerned as people died in the Battle of Yamama, therefore they decided to put together the Quran. Anyway, I can't remember how we end up in Bukhari, but
because Bukhari is the place we go to find out how the Quran was put together. And so this is important that you brought this up, because we're going to I'm going to ask some very disturbing and damaging questions concerning what even this akhbar, as we're talking about, of chapter 6 verse 509, sorry, chapter 6 509. That's all we're talking about today, chapter 6 509. I'm going to ask some questions concerning what Al-Bukhari says, because you can see even what Al-Bukhari is saying in the 9th century makes no sense for the 7th century. But we'll get to that. We'll hold off on that. And when we come to it, I'll ask it.
Okay. I don't know if everyone was able to hear you very clearly, but can I ask you to put the earphone on, Jay, if your earphone is close to you?
Okay, you keep talking while I look for one.
Okay, it's better now. It is better now. Sorry, a little bit ago sound was a bit funny. Anyway, so Jay, do you know how many Hafiz, how many people who memorized the Quran died in the Battle of Yamama?
We don't know the number. We know that a large number. That's what.
Okay, when it says large number, it is talking about approximate 70 Hafiz, 70.
That's a large number. That's a huge number.
70, according to Muslims, a huge number. For me, that just shows us actually claim Muslims are making thousands people memorize the Quran, thousands people memorize the Quran at the time of Muhammad is false, because Islamic world suddenly start concerned about the Quran, and they claim that they lost the Quran because 70 people who memorized the Quran died in the battle. That's not very good, I think, for Islamic world. only 70 people dies and suddenly Muslims all freaked out, what's going to happen to their Quran?
Okay, just to back up on that, are you hearing what Hatun's saying? And this actually, I have never thought of this before until you brought it up right now, Hatun.
No, I did tell you that before. You knew that.
I don't. This is the first time I've heard it. If so, then I've lost memory of it. If there are only 70, and this is going to force Abu Bakr and Umar to bring Zayd ibn Thabit forward, they're bringing him at this time because there's an emergency. There's a crisis here. If this is a crisis with only 70 having died, that showed very few. Then you're saying very few had memorized it. When you stop, when you stop and ask what Muslims have said, because Muslims today say thousands have memorized it. If thousands have memorized it, then why only 70 dying causes a crisis?
Yeah, that's my question. Because they are saying large majority of people are dying, therefore they are losing the large part of the Quran. But the number of people died, according to Islamic tradition, is not number of people who died. Number of Hafiz who memorized the Quran died. That's only 70 people, according to Islamic tradition. Anyway, so like that just shows actually it's not very like thousands people memorized it. And when those people died in the battle, they took certain part of the Quran with them, because Hadith talks about it. Large part of the Quran may be lost unless we collect it. So people are already concerned that actually, as if they don't put the Quran together, there will be no Quran.
Okay, let's take that and let's unpack that a bit, because this is something that I've yet to see Muslims answer. We are assuming, therefore, and we can pretty well substantiate from what Al-Bukhari is saying here, that the Quran had not yet been written down. Am I correct, Hatun?
Yes.
Okay, so the Quran had not been written down. This is obvious. Otherwise, what would they need? Why would they need to bring Zayd ibn Thabit to both Abu Bakr and Umar? Why would they even have him come to talk to them if the Quran was already written down? It's not written down. Why? Because even Al-Bukhari goes on and says, Zayd ibn Thabit, when he's asked to write it down, he then says, why are you telling me to do something the Prophet never did? The Prophet never wrote it down. So I know Muslims Muslims are always coming back and saying, oh, it was all written down by this time. If that is the case, then you've got to deal with Al-Bukhari, volume 6, 509. Because what I can see here, number one, it had not been written down. Now, this brings into question some really damaging questions from my side. First and foremost, why in the world did Muhammad not have it written down? Question number one.
He was very busy with 13 wives.
If this is the greatest thing that Muhammad's supposed to, if this is his greatest mission, really, what is his major mission in life? What is he credited for? What did he give us? What did he provide the world? The last revelation. Am I correct? This book right here. If this is the last revelation, the greatest revelation, if this is the one thing that Muhammad was supposed to give the world, if this was the reason why Muhammad was raised up for this purpose, that means he was given this book over a period of 22 years, from 610 to 632. So he had 22 years to write this book down. Now, folks, help me here. If that was the major reason why he was given for a ministry, why in the world did he not write it down in those 22 years? Now, Muslims will come back to me and they say, because he could not read or write. Okay, so he could not read or write. How long does it take to read and write Arabic? Listen, I do not speak Arabic, but I learned to read and write Arabic in 2 weeks. When I was there in 1994, when I was taking Arabic there at the School of Oriental and African Studies, it took me 2 weeks to read and write. There are only 28 letters in the Arabic alphabet. It does not take long to read and write Arabic. Muhammad could already speak Arabic. It was his native tongue. Why in the world did he not learn to read and write Arabic? That's the first question. Number two, he had a secretary. Now, Hatun, what do secretaries do? What is their responsibility?
Typing.
Well, they didn't have typewriters back in the 7th century, so let's dismiss that response.
Okay, answering the phones, making sure your boss does all the things he's supposed to do, writing things down.
Thank you finally for getting it correct. That's the one thing secretaries are supposed to do, is to write what their masters tell them to write. If this was the greatest responsibility, this is the greatest thing for Muhammad, if this was his ministry, if he was chosen for just this one thing, and yet he had a secretary who was given him for this very thing, and the secretary's responsibility was one thing and one thing alone, to write the Quran down. Why in the world did Zayd ibn Thabit not have it written down before Muhammad died?
So when we look at the Sunni, we are talking about the Sunni account, because as we said, Shia account is a little bit different. As we talk about, when we say Quran, we are talking about current Quran, which is surah, from surah 1 to surah 114. Maybe Jay thinks you can learn the language very easily, but I'm still learning the language. But the point is,
No, hold on, Hatun. I did not say that. I didn't say learn the language. I said to learn
reading it. Yeah.
Hatun, so, you can learn to read and write Arabic very quickly. If you put your mind to it. I'm not asking, and I'm not suggesting you have to learn the language. Muhammad already knew the language.
I'm still working on my English readings, and I will get there one day. But I haven't been here for 23 years to get that. Anyway, as you said,
let's back up right there. Why would God in his wisdom have chosen a man who could not read and write to give his greatest revelation to?
That's the miracle of Islam.
No, that shows ineptitude by God himself. Now, would your God do something like that, Hatun?
But the issue is, let's say he wasn't able to read and write, but he was ministering, or he was he was being prophet for 23 years. I think that was good time for him to, instead of like having sex with his wives or going and killing people, he could learn how to write it down, and then he could give his last revelation to the people whom he trusts. But he did not do that.
The other question I have, and as you can see in chapter 6, verse 509, it says that Zayd ibn Thabit had to go to bones, had to go to stones, had to go to stalks of palm trees, and then also to the memory of those who had survived the Battle of Yamama. As you pointed out, 70 were killed at the Battle of Yamama, and that already caused a crisis. The fact that he did not, the fact that he had to go to these other accoutrements suggests to me that something was being written down on these bones and stones and palm stalks. If that is the case, why in the world did he not compile them into one codex, into one manuscript? What in the world was going on? And does this not show an enormous ineptitude on not only Muhammad's part, but also on Zayd ibn Thabit's part? Because if there's one thing Zayd ibn Thabit should have done, he should have taken, every time the Prophet got a new revelation, he should have taken it down, and he should have written down what he heard, so that this would never have been a problem. Yeah. Okay, so that's, I mean, these are huge questions. I have another question before we go on. If God, in his wisdom, and I believe God is wise, he is all wise, he's omniscient. If God in his wisdom had already given us two revelations, the Old and New Testament, already in Hebrew and in Greek, well, if God had already have been able to use those two languages, why would God then turn around and use a third language that could not even accommodate the text? And we're going to get into that as we get into 6:5:10, because you're going to see that even when Zayd ibn Thabit was supposed to write it down with 3 other friends, Uthman tells him to write it in the Qurayshi dialect so that everybody could understand it. That is a huge problem. We'll get to that later. But my first difficulty is, why would God even choose this language, which could not even accommodate this book, when he already had Hebrew and Greek to use earlier, and he had plenty of other languages he could have used? Then why did he choose a man who could even read and write to then give his greatest revelation? And why did that man not learn to read and write? And then thirdly, Why did he not at least give permission for his secretary, which is the function a secretary should do, to then write it down? These are three questions I'd like to hear Muslims respond to.
Okay. So I don't have access to the chat part, but Muslims, if any Muslim is watching, and if you are on the chat part, please, you can respond to Jay, or I can turn on the Skype. You can call in if you want that. But can I just add a couple of points which you made, Jay? So I put the hadith on the screen again. So because Muhammad did not put the Quran together as a book from Surah 1 to Surah 114, or how much revealed to Muhammad, people who's supposed to compile it, they are concerned, they don't want to do it, because they say, this is Muhammad didn't do it, therefore we shouldn't do it. There is something called Buddha in Islam, and Muhammad talks about Buddhists to be evil. So Muslims, early Muslims, don't want to put the Quran in book form because they know they are going to commit Buddha, they are going to do Buddha. Therefore, they don't want to do it. Innovation, that they don't want to do it. On another point you made, where Zayd bin Thabit needed to put together the parchments, bonds, and then also needed to go and ask people's what they remember for the Quran for him to put it together. Hadith says he had to look for it. He had to search for it. That shows actually it wasn't available or accessible for to Zayd bin Thabit, who put the Quran together, who memorized the Quran, or who are those people who we would identify as a hafiz. So those informations were not accessible. Therefore, Zayd bin Thabit needed to go look for it, go and search for it. I think that's something important. And then he tells that's huge job. How I'm gonna do? Even the moving the mountains are much easier to do than.
Hatun, there's a few that have tried to respond. Let me just read what they've said.
Oh, okay, sorry.
You have Daniel Valencia, who says Muhammad could read and write. He was in charge of Khadija's trade transactions. Therefore, he should have been able to write or write down the Quran. The response to that is, that is only what if that is so, then why are Muslims today suggesting he could not read or write? And the reason is because of Surah 61, verse 7, and Surah is it 2? I can't remember the other one, which refers to the fact that this Prophet Ahmad, who could not read or write, that's a Quranic reference to. Then you have another Muslim who is that was not a Muslim, by the way. You have this Muslim who is saying, trustworthy. He was saying, Jay, are you telling God what is easy for him, and God does not know what language is suitable or how many languages are enough to scriptures? And no, I'm not saying that I'm telling God. I'm asking, if this is the Islamic God, if Allah is their God, and he already, if he is truly God, then why is it that he didn't already use the language that existed? And why didn't he already use the people that he had chosen, the Jews, to receive his final revelation? And then more importantly, why in the world did he choose a man who could not read or write from an Arab world using an Arab language which could not even support the revelation that he sent? So there are some comebacks here. Not any of them are good. And what many people are asking, where are you Muslims? Why aren't you answering? And so far, the Muslims aren't coming back with anything that I can see.
I think just addition to what you said regarding the language, it is not only language or people group God chose with his wisdom, but God picked people or sent a revelation which contradicts the revelation he sent before. It's not only the language, it is also the message and the messenger. Message confirms contradicts the previous message. Messenger contradicts the previous messengers as well. So it's fails in a couple of different areas.
Okay, there are a few people here who are trying to say that Muhammad was able to read or write. One is referring to I'm just leaving it here. They're referring to the quotes. Molly could read well enough to erase his self-assumed title from a treaty, therefore effectively denying his claim. This is from Phil Horaya. This is not a Muslim saying this. This is Phil.
Yeah.
Thanks,
So
Phil.
we do have Islamic tradition which implies that Muhammad was capable to read and write. But
True. Go ahead.
we are just, because we are mainly engaging with the basic Muslim arguments, that is the response they would give it to us. If you even go to the Shia sources would confirm Muhammad was able to read and write, because he was helping Ali out as Ali was compiling the Qur'an. So Islamic tradition contradicts one another regarding if he was able to write it or not. But majority Muslims sadly discredits the hadiths, and then they would say he wasn't able to read.
Yeah. Truth about Islam is saying being illiterate in the Quran means not knowing the books, the Injil and the Torah, not that he didn't know how to read and write. Since before he died, he asked to have a paper to write on. That referring to what you're talking about. Okay. But in the Quran, it's not that at all. I think it's very clear that he is considered to be the illiterate prophet. And that's why the popular notion today by almost all Muslims I meet is that he could not read or write. Therefore, that is why this is the only miracle they can come up with is this book, because how could an illiterate mind write such a great book? Well, we're kind of destroying this book today and many other days, showing that that almost all of it is borrowed from other sources. Nothing is new under the sun. It's not that great a literature, but that's for another time. That's for another place. Let's continue back with this again.
Let me just add what you said regarding the comment was made. If Muhammad did not know the previous books, why did he put his hand on the Torah and then say, this is the book I believe in? If he was able to read and write, and the Dawah team is misinterpreting regarding he couldn't read and write, then we would ask the same question Jay has been asking. Why did he not put together as the revelation came to him through Gabriel? Why, when he died, there wasn't anything accessible that people could simply take it from Muhammad and then say, guys, look, this is what revealed to us. Let's do some work on it. That never happened.
Okay. Here's a good question that comes up from Sahih Muslim is his name. And he asks, Jay, which is the earliest New Testament manuscript, and is it not from 200 years after the death of Jesus, as you're claiming about the Qur'an? Now, the answer to that very quickly, before we even get into an answer to that, we're not making the claims that you make about the Quran. There's no one in this room, Hatun and I do not make the claim that we have the original manuscript of the New Testament. We would never make that claim. We do have very early fragments of the New Testament, and we do have the complete New Testament by the 4th century in the Sinaiticus right there in London. Also the Alexandrinus, which is also there in London, which is from the 5th century, and we have the Vaticanus, which is in Rome, which is from the early 4th century. But that was because by that time you had someone like Constantine, who was the emperor, who then created and commissioned 50 of these codices written on animal skin, parchment. Animal skin is durable. It does last for, in this case, for 1,400 years, more than that, 1,700 years. The case that we're talking about is we're looking at the Quran, which was also written on parchment, animal skins. All the earliest manuscripts of note are all written on parchments. So the claims the Muslims are making are completely different than the claims we make. Nonetheless, though we don't claim that we have the originals, we have so many manuscripts. We have so many that we can look to. We have over 24,000 manuscripts that we can look at. Not all of them are early. About 235 of them are before the 6th century. So that's before the Quran that we can look at. And that's why it's important that we do like with like. As Christians, we don't make this claim. As Muslims, you do make this claim that you can reproduce your entire manuscript. You can reproduce your whole Quran at the time of Uthman, certainly by the time of Uthman. Some even claim that back to Muhammad. That's for another time. We're going to get into that in another in another session that Hatun and I will do. What we're saying right now is, what does Al-Bukhari say? Al-Bukhari is very clear that your Quran was completed by 652. 20 years after the time period we're looking at today. Today, we're looking at 632, between 632 and 634. We're looking at the first recension. We're looking at the first copy of the Quran. Remember, there are two recensions. There are two Qurans, according to al-Bukhari, that were created. This is the first one. This is the initial one. This is the one that Abu Bakr and Umar commissioned. And this is the one that they asked Zayd ibn Thabit to write. Now we're getting into that. Since this is what al-Bukhari says, we're now asking some damaging questions concerning this very first recension, this very first codex. So no one's in question whether or not a codex was written down. We are very clear, or we're very sure that al-Bukhari stipulates that a codex was written down. A manuscript was completed. A complete Quran existed at between 632 and 634. That's within 2 years of Muhammad's death. So now picking that up, Hatun, let's continue from here.
Okay, I have to add something on the biblical manuscripts, though. Is that okay?
Put your other pair of glasses on and go ahead.
So, history of the biblical manuscripts and the Quranic manuscripts are very, very different. We cannot compare them. Bible is written, first couple of centuries of the Bible it is people wrote it down under the persecution. Christians were burned, eaten by lions, and burned on the stakes because of their faith, because of their scripture. So we were persecuted. Versus Muslims never had those issues. They were the one who were persecuting. They were the one who were rich. But in somehow, still Muhammad didn't put together. In somehow, still we don't have their writings. That's like says a lot about it. Our earliest biblical manuscripts fragment date is 125 AD. That's P52. And today, we have 5,856 Greek manuscripts. And most of them were, like, if you look at the kind of manuscripts, Dr. Dan Wollens put together lots of things, and Peter Williams put things together. You can see it is actually miracle how our earliest manuscripts survived, because they were not written on the animal skins in the 2nd century. They were not written. They were not written in a good environment. They were written under the persecution, and what we have is pretty reliable, even according to non-Christians. Sadly, we cannot say the same thing about the Quran. As Sahih Bukhari says, in 634, they were hunting down the Quranic verses to put in the first of their Quran. They were hunting down. Zayd bin Thabit needed to search for the Quran. It wasn't accessible. 70 people died in the battle. Now they freaked out. They are gonna lose the most of the Quran. Why? They were rich. They were the one who were persecuting. Why didn't they write it down?
Okay, there's a question here that I'd like to respond to. Trustworthy is his name. DCCI Ministries, you are saying that the Bible is not completely preserved, but somehow we believe everything in it. None of us have said it's not completely preserved. Did you say that, Hatun? I didn't say that. So please don't put words in our mouth. What we're saying is we don't have the original. That's all we're saying. It is completely, we pretty much know 99.9%. Bruce Metzger has probably done the best work on this. Dr. Dan Wallace is doing work on this in Dallas. They pretty much, all the scholars from today can look at the New Testament because of the fact we have such a plethora. We have such an enormous amount of early manuscripts of the New Testament. When we're talking about the New Testament now, we're not talking about the Old Testament. So it's not perfectly preserved. No one would say that on this show.
Can I just tell you what Bart Ehrman says?
Yes, go ahead. Bart Ehrman is.
I am assuming that person is Muslim who is bringing it up. So Bart Ehrman wrote book together with book is here. Book is here with Bruce Metzger and Bart Ehrman. They wrote a book together. In page 126. They state, besides textual evidence, delivered from the New Testament Greek manuscripts and from early versions. The textual critics has available to numerous scriptural quotation, including commentaries, sermons, and other writings are available by early church fathers. Indeed, so extensive are those quotations, citations, that if all other sources of our knowledge of the text of the New Testament were destroyed, they would be sufficient alone for us to reconstruct the reconstruct of the New Testament. That's page 126. Bart Ehrman simply says, actually, we do have lots of writings that we can put together the New Testament for you.
Okay, listen, I just want to come back to another reference that Trustworthy seems to be trying to argue with us on this. He says, don't lie, Hatun. Zayd ibn Thabit did not look for the Quran, but he was looking for the witnesses of every verse of the Quran. Please, 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 Trustworthy, read what we've just read. He said it very clearly. What you read there in Al-Bukhari, your text 6509, it is not that he was looking for witness, he was looking for verses. If you read the rest of the verse, if you go down and continue on with what we have, what we already looked at, remember what we read. Let me remind you of it. He at the bottom of 509, when you look at 509,
let me share the screen, Jay.
Just go ahead and share the screen. Read what we have said there. Zayd ibn Thabit has to look for even two verses, chapter 9, verse 128 and verse 129, Surah Al-Tawbah. He cannot find it except with one man. He's not looking for a witness here. He's looking for this verse. This verse he could not find until he found this one man. Look at the bottom of the screen there on the left side, and you will see. So I started looking for Quranic material, not for witnesses, for Quranic material, and collecting it from parchment, scapula, that's bones, leaves, stalks of dates and palms, and also from the memories of men. He's not looking for witnesses. A bone is not a witness. A stone is not a witness. All right, get it correct. He's actually looking for Quranic verses. Verily, there has come to you an apostle among yourself. It grieves him that you should receive any injury or difficulty. Then he goes on, and up above it, I'm looking above it now. Where does it say where he's looking, he's finding, and he sees only one reference with Ataba? I can't see it right here, right now.
It's here. Can you see where it says 128?
Here he is.
Yeah.
From amongst yourself, this is what it grieves out there. Okay, I found with Kuzaima 2 verses of Surah Al-Taba, which I had not found with anybody else. So here again, he's not looking for witnesses. He's actually looking for Quranic verses. And he only finds these 2 verses with this one man. In the next reference, in the next page, when we get to 510, there's another one, from Surah 33, that he finds again with one man. So we're looking at bits and pieces that he finds on bone, bits and pieces that he finds on stone, bits and pieces that he finds on palm leaves. Not witnesses. Those aren't witnesses. Those are inanimate. And he has to then piece together the Quran from all these different sources, including the memory of those who were eyewitnesses. That's where you're getting confused here. So don't stipulate that he was not trying to put the Quran together. He was trying to create the Quran together. And the fact that he had to go so far to find from even just one man, in this case for 2 verses, in the next time we're going to see from another man for just 1 verse, you can see that this is done piecemeal. What if he missed something? What if many of those who died at Yamama had other parts of the Quran that were not there? What if the fact that he, as just one individual, did not do such a great job and had to go and look for other pieces? You're going to find out in the next chapter, there is a verse that he had missed in the first one, and that's chapter 33. So please be careful of what even your references say. It's your references who are telling us this. We're not making this up.
Yeah, and in the future, we will see Muslims are saying, actually, no one can make a claim that we've got the whole Quran. We need to say we've got what it is survived. People are talking about, actually, they can't. That there should be chapter as long as Surah 9. They can't find it. Surah 9 is supposed to be longer. They can't find. Sorry, Surah 33 supposed to be longer, but it is only 73 verses. And in the Sahih Bukhari, since I am the one who's been accused of lying, here's the book, okay? Page 425, Sahih Bukhari, volume 6. It says, I start looking for the Qur'an. It doesn't say I start hunting for the witnesses. It says I start looking for the Quran and collecting it from blah, blah, blah. So it wasn't he was hunting for the witnesses. He was hunting for the verses. And sadly, it wasn't accessible to him because he had to do search for it. I am sorry to see actually Muslims are disagreeing with one of their greatest hadith collectors, Sahih Bukhari. That goes to the history as a sad day.
Hatun, I'm reading the comments here, and I just want to say congratulations and welcome home, we dem boys. He just claimed that he has given his life to Jesus Christ from Islam, not about a year ago, and he just wanted to make that clear. God bless you. It's good to have you home. It's good to have you part of it. So, we dem boys, God bless you for coming and joining with us. It's great to have those who love Jesus Christ, who have come out of Islam because they have seen the treachery of Islam, and they love Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior.
Please to drop email to info@dcciministries.com so we can have a quick chat on that. So praise God for rescuing and redeeming people, and our prayer is that there are many more out there that God actively works in their lives, we will see they repented and bow down to Lord Jesus Christ.
Someone suggested that Trustworthy should change his name.
Because he's discrediting Islamic trustworthy.
Not very trustworthy. I mean, he's making mistake after mistake after mistake. But that's okay. That's what this is for. Thank you for even trying. Now, let's get back. Let's continue with what we were saying here, because you brought up some good points, Hatun. This is interesting that so far, almost everything we have looked at is based on hearsay of 200 years after the fact. We're going to go with it because it's all that we've got. And it's the fact that according to the 9th century hadith compilers like Sahih Muslim and also Al-Bukhari, Tirmidhi, Ibn Dawud, and others like them, they all believe the Quran was compiled first to begin with Abu Bakr, under the time of Abu Bakr, by Zayd ibn Thabit, who was given that responsibility to do so. He did not want to do it. It's obviously he did not want to do it because the Prophet hadn't done it, proving that this had not been written down before this time. So now they're putting it together, and Zayd ibn Thabit has to go to all these different places, bits and pieces here. He gets it from stone, he gets it from bone, he gets it from palm stalks, he gets it from people's memories. But the people's memories are just those who have survived, the other 70 who have already died at the Battle of Yamama, who are the greater number of the companions who had memorized it, the Hafiz who had memorized it. That was why they even had to write it down, because they didn't want all of the memories to be gone. Now, the question I'm going to ask a second time, I still want a Muslim to answer this. Why is it that the Quran you have today, if this is how it was piecemeal put together in 632 to 634, how can you even begin to say that this was complete? How can you even know whether or not this book here that was put together, and we're just talking about the first recension, you're going to see the second recension is different from this book even. But even this first recension, how can you know that this is even the same as that which existed in heaven in chapter 85, verse 22? And how can you know that this is the same book that Muhammad had, since Muhammad never was around when this was being compiled? He was already dead. He had been dead for 2 years. He was not there to supervise it.
And he never said okay to that book.
He is not a testimony to this book. That's hugely damaging. Wait till we get to the next topic, which will be chapter 6, verse 510, because then it gets even more damaging. Now, Muslims, we want you to respond to this. Please, you're going and you're attacking the Bible. You're trying to do everything to get out of it. You're trying to say this is nothing more than witnesses. You're trying to say that this is a miracle because the fact that he could not read and write. You're not even dealing with the questions we're asking. Why is it that God even chose someone who is illiterate? Why is it that he didn't learn to read and write? Why is it that he didn't give it to his secretary to write it down if he couldn't read and write? And why in the world did Abu Bakr and Umar, why did they not make copies of it immediately? Where are the copies from that first recension?
So until people kind of response to you. Can I just bring your attention again? Actually, you already made the point on Surah 9, verse 128 and 129. So apparently, this verse end up in the Quran with only one person's testimony. Two verses end up in the Quran with only one person's testimony. Why?
You know, Hatun, that according to Islamic tradition, a verse cannot be authoritative unless there are at least two testimonies of that verse.
So where are other people?
Already you see that law has been discredited by what we see in al-Bukhari right here, because there was only one witness that Zayd ibn Thabit was discovered, and he had to go a long way to find him. So that discredits this idea of authority. I know that there are some Muslims, the fellow here in the United States who I debated a number of years ago, who throws out chapter 9 verse 120 and 129 for that very reason, because it only has one witness. He does not consider that part of the Quran.
Yeah, I do have the Quran, which doesn't have Surah 9, verse 128 and 129.
The author of that, that's the guy I'm talking about. He is the one, and he also takes out chapter 33, verse 23 for the same reason, because it only has one testimony. So this is problematic in and of itself. And what they do is that they try to find the number 19 by eradicating those three verses. So it just goes around and round and like a circus. And you can see why it's difficult for Muslims to know how to defend these kind of questions. I can see so far no Muslim has defended. I'm looking at the comments here. I'll keep scanning them to see if any Muslim will dare to try to answer the questions we've brought up so far.
So I think there is something serious when it comes to the how many people's testimony made into the Quran as the divine revelation of Allah. Because if you think very practically, even though Surah 9 verse 128 and 129 affects some of the doctrine of Islamic faith, but there are the other verses in the Quran affects my faith, affects my core doctrine. Today we will never know actually who are the people who heard, for example, Surah 4 verse 157 from Muhammad, because we don't know who are those people Zayd bin Thabit was looking for. It is just sad. It is just sad that one person affects lots of people's eternity.
Now, this Trustworthy comes back and he says, Hadith, Hatun, this hadith proves that Zayd ibn Thabit knew the verse but was looking for the witness. No, read it again.
Yeah.
Till I found the last verse of Surah Al-Tawbah with Al-Khuzaimah Al-Ansari. I did not find it with any other than him. The verse is. So he obviously did not know this verse existed until he came across this fellow named Khuzaimah Al-Ansari. It's regardless of what it is. Can you see that this is a problem? It seems like you're trying to pick at straws here. Nonetheless, the fact that these are all from disparate accounts, these from disparate locations, the fact that Zayd ibn Thabit had to go and find this verse, didn't even know that it existed until this man said it, and then he appropriated it, suggests to me that either Khuzaimah made it up or he was the only one that had heard it. What's fascinating to me is why didn't the others not know about this verse? Why was there not many different copies made of it? Why is it that this was not referred to by the others who were the companions? Why did none of the other companions who were still living, from which Zayd ibn Thabit went to, knew about 9 verse 128 and 129? These are a lot of questions that you need to answer. I don't expect you to do so today. Nonetheless, put them back there, hold them to them, because you're going to have to answer these questions concerning what your Al-Bukhari says here.
Let me read Al-Bukhari so Al-Bukhari can speak to Muslims. It seems sometimes maybe if persons is not speaking well English like me, you might lose the words in the meaning. I read it apart. Abu Bakr kept on urging me to accept his idea until Allah opened my chest for what he had opened the chest of Abu Bakr and Umar. So I start looking for the Quran. I start looking for the Quran. It wasn't everyone heard that Zaid bin Thabit is collecting the Quran and people got on the queue. He was looking for the Quran and collected it from what was written on the palm leaf stalks, thin white stones, and also from the man who knew it by heart. And then it says, until I found the verse of Surah 9. He's hunting for the verses. He is hunting for the Quran. And then there is a moment he says, yep, look, until I found the last verse of Surah 9, verse 128 and 129. So, those of you who wants to read it, this is Sahih Bukhari, volume 6, page number 425, Arabic and English all together. So you can just read it and then see why Sahih Bukhari writes it as they were looking for it. He found someone knew about it. So that's the issue.
Okay, the question has been brought up by one of the Muslims as to why, if we are so intent on looking for more than one witness, what do we do about John 1:1? Where were the more witnesses for John? John.
Just a moment. That is Islamic criteria. That is not the biblical criteria.
That's what I was going to say. You took it right out of my mouth.
Sorry.
That's all right. We don't even ask this of the Bible, what the Muslims have asked of the Quran. And the reason why is because John was an eyewitness, but he wasn't the only one to hear this. He was an eyewitness along with the other 11. So along with the other 11, the 12 of them who heard Jesus say this, John was the one that wrote it down. We don't ask and we don't demand that there be more than one eyewitnesses, but we do know that there were 11 other eyewitnesses who heard everything that John heard and saw everything that John saw. That is a criteria that only Muslims demand of their Quran. And the reason why is because it was written after Muhammad had died. It was written down after Muhammad was not there as a testimony to it. So that's why they had to come up with this criteria. That's a Islamic criteria. But nonetheless, if you want eyewitnesses, we have 4 witnesses, 2 of them eyewitnesses, and 2 of them he got from the eyewitnesses of life's ministry, the last 3 years of his ministry. A little bit of his first early life, but of his ministry, the last 3 years, we have 4 testimonies from 4 different perspectives, from 4 different authors, 2 of them who were the eyewitnesses of the events that they saw and they heard, and 2 that got it from the eyewitnesses. Now, can you come up with any more eyewitnesses than that from what Muhammad saw? Because almost everything that Muhammad received, he did in private. It was while he was in private. So can you see the problem with that? Everything you're dependent on is from one man. What if Muhammad was wrong on all the things that he heard from Gabriel? What if Muhammad never, since he didn't have any testimony, there was no one there to corroborate what Muhammad had heard. Much of it he heard while he was in a trance. We already did this when we talked about how Muhammad received revelation. And if you look at that, you can see that an awful lot of the time, Muhammad was the only one that heard this revelation. No one else heard it. So everything in the Quran comes from one testimony, one person, Muhammad. What if he's wrong? Now, that's a whole nother area that we're not going to get in today. Let's get back then to volume 6, hadith number 509.
And just remember, Jay, Islamic tradition tells us he was wrong. He was wrong that satanic verses end up in the Quran. But it is sad to see actually Muslims are questioning the authority of the Bible. Islam wouldn't exist according to Quran with the authority of the Bible. Muhammad doesn't have any problem with my Bible. Allah doesn't have any problem with my Bible. Allah doesn't even question author of my Bible. And Muslims today, instead of try to understand and defend undefendable Islam, they're just simply attacking Bible.
It's fascinating when you open up the Quran, you can see verse after verse after verse. Chapter 10, verse 49, chapter 21, verse 7. It says, Muslims, please, if you have any question, go back to the Taurat and the Injil. Come back to our book. So where is there any reference there that they're not to trust the Bible? It says in chapter 4, verse 136, that God, your God, not only wrote the previous scriptures, the Taurat and the Injil, but the Quran as well. It says in chapter 5, verse 46 and 47, and verse 68, that all Christians, that us, Christians and Jews, we're to come back to our books, and that we're to measure everything we meet by our book, by the Taurat and the Injil. And I have yet to find, in almost 40 years of working with Muslims now, I have yet to find one Muslim that can show me one verse in the Quran that says my book is corrupted. And I'm still waiting. You can't go to chapter 2, verse 79, because you look at verse 78 and you can see it's actually indictment against the Quran, not against the Bible. It's against those Jews who write with their own hands and call it the book. Those are the apocryphal writings, of which the Quran is full of. There is no reference anywhere in this book that my book, that the earlier scriptures have been corrupted, that they have been created or deleted. That your Quran gives authority, verse after verse after verse, to my Bible. So don't even bring it up. It's not worth it. Now, getting back to this, it's so important, Hatun, that we do need to bring it down, because I do need to go in about another 15 minutes.
Okay.
It's so important that we do bring and summarize what we have done so far today.
Okay, so I'll start and then you step in. Did we have the Quran put together from Surah 1 to Surah 114 before the death of Muhammad?
The answer is no. How do we know that? Sahih Bukhari, volume 6, 509. We've just read it there. When Zayd ibn Thabit, when he was asked to do that very thing, his response is, how can I do that which the Prophet didn't even do? So the Prophet did not put the Quran together. Very clear in volume 6, hadith number 509.
So Muhammad, with all of his wisdom, didn't put Quran together. So first Quran was put together because people were dying in the battles and they were losing the Quran. So therefore they wanted to put together. That took place under the Abu Bakr. At the first place, Zayd bin Thabit and Abu Bakr didn't want to practice or commit bidah, but as the time went on, they decided to practice bidah and then put the Quran together.
So it's obvious when you see volume 6, 509, that there was a problem that existed. There was the difficulty of different Qurans. There was the problem of different memorizations. There was the problem of those who had memorized the Quran, the Hafiz, as you call them, who existed, the companions of the Prophet. They were the ones that were given the task of memorizing the Quran as Muhammad received it. They were dying at the Battle of Yamama. 70, you have quoted today. 70 were killed. This caused the crisis. 70 is not thousands. 70 is a very small number. And you corrected me on that. Thank you for doing that, Hatun. God bless you.
No, that's what Muslims are saying. So for them, that if that 70 is big number, that says a lot about actually how many people at the first place memorized them.
A very small number had memorized it, and the fact that so many had died, that this caused the crisis. Why Abu Bakr and Umar had to bring Zayd ibn Thabit to put this book together. He refused to do so. He said, I cannot do what the Prophet had not done. I refuse to do so. They said it would be a good thing if you did. And because of that, he finally relented. And he then had to go and find it. Now look and see where he had to go to find it. He did not know it himself. He was not one of these Hafiz. He was not a memorizer. So where did he go, Hatun, to find this Quran, these verses?
He had to search for it.
And where did he go to search for it?
People to people, people to people.
Bones, stones, palm trees. Obviously, he was just finding bits and pieces here and there. If you go to bones and stones and palm fronds, then you're pretty much saying that you're giving a little bit here, you're grabbing a little bit there, you're grabbing a little bit there. I'd like to know whether or not any one of those palm fronds, any one of those stones, or any one of those bones actually contradicted each other, or what some of them were not worthy to be referred to or even to be retained. That we don't know. All we know is that he had to go to many different places to find these different pieces of the Quran. So he put these different pieces of the Quran together and he created one book. What happened to that book?
So that book was given to Umar and then to Hafsa.
Given to Abu Bakr first. When he died, it was given to Umar. When he died, he gave it to his daughter, who had been a wife of the Prophet. Her name was Hafsa. And what did she do with it?
Can I just express something which makes me usually concerned? So I can understand that Quran was passed to Abu Bakr because it was already under the leadership or under the authority. And then Abu Bakr, Omar. But even though Aisha was the favorite wife of Muhammad, in somehow they did not give that Quran to Aisha, but they passed that Quran to Hafsa, the daughter of Umar as well as wife of Muhammad.
Ooh, a very good point. And I think the reason why is because she was the daughter of Umar. He wanted his daughter to have it. But that is a huge point because that was not even Muhammad's favorite wife.
Yeah, but Aisha was able to hold the Quran under her bed for a while, certain verses. There is already issue between wives fightings. Even in that, they did not choose Aisha, but they choose to give the Quran to Hafsa.
Okay, right there. Stop right there. So the Quran was given to Hafsa finally, and what did she do with it?
She put her under her bed.
So what is the purpose of putting God's greatest revelation under your bed?
Today, Muslims don't even put on the ground or on the even under the any books. But in first century, people were putting under the bed or burning their books.
She hid it under her bed, which means no one read it. Are you hearing me, Hatun?
Yes.
Are those who are watching listening to me? If she put it under her bed, that means only she had access to the first Quran. Only she was given one copy, only one copy. There is no reference to any other copy. We're going to find when we actually get to the next section, which is much more damaging than this section, that it was sent out to every province. And we know of 9 provinces. We're going to look at those 9 provinces. In this case, it was not sent to anybody else. Did Abu Bakr keep a copy for himself? No, he didn't. Did Umar keep a copy for himself? No, he didn't. Did Zayd ibn Thabit keep a copy for himself? No, he didn't. Only Hafsa was given this one copy. No other copies were made. There is only one Quran that was in existence. For 20 years, there was only one Quran. Hold that under your hat, because that's going to become important when we look at the next part of volume 6, hadith number 510.
And also remember, there is always issue with the value and dignity of woman in Islam. But it was the woman who told Muhammad that he's the prophet. And now it is a woman again who is looking after the revelation of Allah. Not any man, but they give it to the woman.
Give it to a woman who is supposedly not trustworthy, and they'd only give it to the most trustworthy woman, Aisha herself. They give it to really one of the women that actually Muhammad didn't want to. Actually, we won't get into that. That goes into another problem about what Muhammad wanted to do with Hafsa earlier. Nonetheless, let's get back to this. So we've got an enormous amount of problems here that we're starting with. This is just the beginning. This is the first recension. This is nothing more than the first Quran. What we're going to find it when we go to the next live stream is that this Quran was still not good enough. There was something that happened in the intervening 20 years. Hold on. Come back. We're going to unpack that when we then look at volume 6, hadith number 510. Because then you're going to see there's an enormous amount of problems with this first recension, with this first codex, with this first Quran.
Yeah. And also side information for us to remember. Allah in the Quran, chapter 15, verse 9, talks about he's going to protect the Quran. Yet tradition tells us things are failed. Allah was not able to protect the Quran. And again, Surah 15, verse 90 or 91 talks about actually corruption of the Quran as well. So what we see is Allah was not even able to protect his book while he promised in the Quran that he's going to protect it.
we're going to find actually after once we get past the next section that we're going to be looking at lots of what the earliest compilers say about how parts of the Quran were lost, parts of the Quran were canceled, parts of the Quran were erased, even parts were eaten by a goat. So we're going to look and we're going to actually quote what the early Muslim scholars say about this Quran. But that's yet to come, because that's from material that from the 9th and 10th century. We're still looking at what happened in the 7th century. We're still looking at chapter 5, chapter 6, volume 6, hadith number 509.
Yeah. So Jay, thank you very much for joining me. It is really great to have you with all your wisdom. And just a practical suggestion for Muslims who were trying to communicate with us through chat. Feel free to drop email to info@dcciministries.com because we will have the follow-up of this topic. If you want to join us in the panel, that will be good opportunity for you to just drop me email, and then we can schedule something. You can come and verbalize instead of try to write on the chat, because sometimes, like I've been in the chat, sometimes you want to write something, by the time you finish your sentence, conversation already moved on, so it is difficult to make your defense. But do feel free to email us, and we can set up another live stream where we just focus on this hadith and then we express each other's thoughts, because according to Christian faith, you are going to end up in hell unless you bow down and worship Lord Jesus Christ. And according to your faith, it is the same for me. I'm going to end up in hell. So both of faiths cannot be true. There is only one of them is true. So we need to get on with the differences. We need to learn to discuss our differences better for eternity of one another. So feel free to drop us email on the topic. We can schedule something. You can verbalize your thoughts if that's what you want to do. If it's not something you want to do, that's absolutely fine anyway.
Hatun, it's been fascinating. I've been trying to follow the dialogues and the chats that have been happening. We have asked over and over again for Muslims to respond to these questions. The only one that tried to was a guy named Trustworthy. He turned out not to be too trustworthy. But thank you, Trustworthy, for at least trying. I wish more Muslims would really respond to these questions. I can see that there's an awful lot of back and forth going on in the chat between people. And it's great to see that you are chatting about what's being said. But it'd be good if we could get Muslims who actually respond to these very difficult questions. These are difficult. It's probably maybe the first time you've heard them. I understand that. You have not been told these things in your own madrasas. You're not being told these things in your own mosques. These are things that we have to bring to you because you're not getting it from your own people. It's not difficult. It's not difficult for you to understand what we're asking. These are not difficult questions we're asking. These are very simple questions. Yet they are foundational to everything you believe. Listen, we don't have these problems with the Bible because we don't make this claim about the Bible. And we ask every one of you to come back to the Bible. It is the better book. It is the bigger book. We don't go to the originals. We don't have the originals, yet we have so many manuscripts. We have so many fragments. We have so many early church fathers quotations. We have lectionaries. We have over 19,800 translations in 11 different languages. So that's why we can know exactly what the Bible says. And that's why we trust it. But thank God we are able to do this because we have done textual criticism. Textual criticism is unknown to the Quran, has never been done by Muslims. If you go on answering Islamic answers, or not answers, what's it called? Islamic Awareness website, there is not one article that has been written on that entire website on why is it that there is not even a complete Quran in the 7th century. And why is it by 721, they only have 96% of the Quran? And that only in fragmentary form, not one complete manuscript. There has been no article written anywhere on Islamic awareness concerning all these corrections that Dr. Dan Brubaker is bringing up, that Hatun and I introduced with his new book that we have right here, this book right here, that was introduced just a month ago at Speaker's Corner. Now you can buy it on Amazon.com. Go buy it. We're going to be unpacking, Hatun and I, later on some of the ramifications of that. So these are stuff that you Muslims have to deal with. I'm so glad I don't have to defend this. Nonetheless, don't get upset with us when we ask these questions. We have to ask these questions because you are making the claims. And since the claims are coming out there, please, for heaven's sakes, do not claim anything about your Quran you cannot support. Please do not make these highfalutin superlative claims about how great this book, the Quran, is. It's not that great. It is written by men. You can see now that it was even compiled according to your traditions, piecemeal from many different sources. We've seen today that even that one that was compiled was still not good enough. And that's why we're going to come back and do another live stream looking at what then happened within the intervening 20 years. When you get to that, it gets much more damaging. But till then, this is Jay here in the United States on the Eastern Coast. Thanks, Hatun, for inviting me onto DCCI. It's great to be able to work with you. It's great to be able to not only knock heads together, but for heaven's sakes, please, Muslims, do not keep defending your book. Come on home. Come on home to Jesus Christ. Please stop defending a book you can't defend and come on home to the Bible, the book you can defend. God bless you. It's been great being with you. We'll see you in a little while as we come back and unpack even more.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Jay. And thank you very much for those of you who engaged us on the chat and those of you who've been adminning on the chat. We really appreciate your help. And those of you who are late nighters, if you are living in UK, within 1 hour 15 minutes, Sam Shamoun and David Wood should be doing live stream in Acts 17 apologetics. Tune in. It is like amazing. They do amazing programs and you get the practice the brain got given to you and you learn something useful. Until next live stream, I think we have live stream scheduled tomorrow evening. Hope to see you tomorrow evening. If not at Speaker's Corner, if not, hopefully in heaven. God bless you all.
Just to say one more thing, Al-Fadi and I will be doing a live stream on Fander Films at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time Saturday morning at 11 o'clock. If any of these, I see there's 160 people watching right now. Well done, 162 of you. We've been up to 180 so far on this session.
So is it your 11 o'clock?
11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, which will be 4 o'clock p.m. London time, Saturday afternoon. 4 o'clock p.m. And we'll be doing much of the same material that Hatun and I have been going through. Al-Fadi and I will be doing from a different perspective. So come and join us. We want to do piggyback back on what Hatun's doing. We want to do the same thing, but do it with an Arab scholar. I'll be being one of the best Arab scholars. He used to be a Salafi Muslim. He speaks fluent Arabic from Saudi Arabia, from the same town that Muhammad came from. So he speaks the Qurayshi dialect. He can cheat it. He can also, more than that, he is doing his doctoral thesis on the Sana'a manuscript. So the man is not only intelligent, he has an enormous background. I've never met a Muslim of his caliber, and it's such a privilege to work with him. He and I will be on at 4 o'clock p.m. London time, 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time, United States, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon. We'll see you then on Fander Films.
Okay, and see you all. God bless you.